Good to see you.
You can't, yeah, he said he can't hear very
A little
well.
hard of hearing.
Okay, I'll speak up. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. You can go.
Okay, so right now, we're pretty much ready to go.
Okay,
And so Mr. Klimola is here, I'm here, and we're just finishing the very last bit of technical stuff to get you guys, to get your screen up on the screen in this room, but it's on my laptop. So, and we're gonna dial up the volume so Mr. Klimola can hear.
Sorry. Set under too many cannons. Lots of them. Yeah.
Carl, will anyone else from the town be joining us?
The town administrator is supposed to, but I haven't seen him yet, but he's chronically late, somewhat like I am.
Sure, understood.
I did see the flood though in the center of town.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we moved here in 1948, and
Yeah, it was
Dad
nice.
took me uptown to see it. And also the river, the Bird River at the same time.
I'll bet you saw, that was, I've seen some photos of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me go, I'm gonna stop this.
What was it, 55?
55.
Yeah.
You ready? Okay, so you're up on the screen in this room, and like I said, Mr. Klimola is here, I'm here, and I'm hoping that we can hear everything, so your guys are ready to roll. Mr. Klimola just got through telling me that he saw the flood in 1955. His family moved
wow.
to town in 1948, so they saw what happened before this flood control structure was in place, so he's a longtime veteran of town.
Very good, very good.
So I'm going to step in and said, Mr. Klimola, on the screen, on the top left is Darren Davis, USDA. He's the big project manager for this. So that's U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service. Next to him is project manager Joe Higgins. And then on the lower, also with USDA, and on the lower left is Charles Johnston. He's one of the engineers on the project. He's been with this thing from the start, since before I got involved with it. So we've got the two USDA people in charge of this, and the design engineer who's been with this throughout. He's with a firm called Du Bois King. He's up in Vermont, where they're getting plenty of snow. So anyway, that's who's here, and we're ready to roll.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for braving the weather. Appreciate it. I'm sorry we're not there in person. I had hopes to come there and be sitting across the table from you, but unfortunately the weather made it such we thought we better not do that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a presentation, a brief one, to at least give us a little background and help us with the discussion as to what we're talking about today. And then I'll use that sort of, and then what I'll do, I'll give sort of the NRCS perspective, and I'll explain who that is, who we are in a minute. And then Charlie, I'll allow you then to kind of follow up if you have anything after I'm done to specific to the design, to the alternatives and the plan you've developed. Does everything look okay on the screen for everyone?
Looks good here.
Yep, fine here.
Okay, so hopefully we can get things to move forward. All right, first of all, we're here for the final public meeting for the Allen Site Dam Rehabilitation Project Plan. And this is the third meeting we've had. So, and I'm Darren Davis with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I thought I ought to start by explaining exactly who NRCS is. So we are a federal agency under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we primarily provide technical and financial assistance to farmers and other private landowners to conserve natural resources on their property. So we work with the farming community a lot in our day-to-day roles, I would say, as far as helping them conserve water resources, soil resources, and any others, air and animal and plant resources on their properties. And we have financial and technical assistance to do that. However, we also do technical and financial assistance with local organizations and units of government to plan and implement watershed projects, watershed scale projects. This is primarily done through a public law passed back in the mid-50s, Public Law 566, as a result of the floods that you, sir, had witnessed as a child. So the federal government said that the flooding was a menace to society at that time, and they developed this program to help support towns in dealing with that flooding. So part of this then, since that time, local communities with NRCS assistance have constructed over 11,000 dams in 47 states. So NRCS, or Soil Conservation Service at the time, for many of these, worked hand in hand with local sponsors, towns, units of government to build these flood control structures to help reduce the impacts of flooding. So, but what we've determined is around 2000 that we have a lot of these that are now nearing their lifespan, their 50-year lifespan. So NRCS at the national level said, we got to do something about that. So they came up with a watershed rehabilitation program. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight as it relates to the Allen Site Dam. And you can see the map there, shows a little bit where all these dams and flood control projects are. We have 30 in the state of Massachusetts. So, and really what this rehabilitation is looking to do is to replace deteriorating components, upgrade the dam to meet the current dam safety laws. You can imagine that they've changed a bit over the 50 years that these dams have been in place. And then also extend the service life of the dam for another 50 to 100 years. That's the goal. So when we talk about this dam rehabilitation program, we got to talk a little bit about cost share. So what's this costing and who's paying? Well, the first process that we go through is of our 30 dams that we have in Massachusetts, my predecessors said, all right, we're going to do dam assessments. And that assessment is 100% paid for by NRCS. And that was just to determine if it met current day standards or is it in need of rehabilitation. And we looked at all of our dams, and Allen Site is one that we said, yes, it is in need of rehabilitation. It doesn't meet the current day requirements. That's not to say it's not safe. It is in fine condition, it's well maintained by the town, and it's not in a threat of failure. It just doesn't meet current day standards for dam operation. And we can explain a little bit more what that means later on. So we went into the planning process and we requested funds and got money for planning. So we're now paying for the planning of the alternatives to determine what to do to make this dam meet current day requirements. Then after that would be design costs. We go into designing what would need to be installed on the dam to rehabilitate it. Then we look at construction costs. And you see, this is a nice thing really for sponsors, is that you see the top three there are all 100%. NRCS is paying 100% of these phases. So we paid for the assessment. We're paying now for the plan, which is now we're wrapping up the plan. That's really why we're here. And then we'll 100% design or pay for the design. The town or the local sponsor, in this case, the town of Walpole, will be responsible for some funding when we get to construction. And that's going to be 35% of the construction costs, 100% of the permitting, and 100% of any land acquisition costs, which I don't believe there will be any for this site. So again, components of Allen Site, we had our assessment completed in 2015. The planning's really been going on from 2020 to 2023. That's a little bit longer than we normally like to go with this, but there were a few issues over the last few years that kind of slowed the whole world down a bit, and then also just some changes we had going on with this within our agency, and then just dealing with the work that was being done, making sure we got everything right. So then you'll see now the engineering design would be coming up and construction, and there are question marks as to when that might happen. But looking forward to continuing this process. So a little bit about Allen site. Again, many of you know what this is, know the dam. I just throw this up for a little background. You know, it's located on Diamond Brook. It's built in 1981. It's a multi-purpose flood control dam. So that was 1981. We were still the Soil Conservation Service, but we were there designing this, working with the sponsor, signing agreements, doing the design, and paying for a portion of the installation. Drainage area is about 1 square mile. Normal pool surface area is about 17.5 acres. So there is water behind this dam permanently. Some do not have that. At the auxiliary spillway crest, meaning if we filled up to the top before it started to flow around through the auxiliary spillway that flows around the dam, we'd really be impounding 36 acres of water. The length is 1,500 feet. Height is 21 feet high. You can see that the auxiliary spillway length is 700 feet. It's 120 feet wide. So that's a channel that goes around the side of the dam, and I'll show that on a map in a bit here. Principal spillway is a 30-inch reinforced concrete pipe that goes through the dam. That's where the normal flow, steady flow of water goes through. And it is a high hazard structure. Certainly it would cause threat to property and life downstream. So it is rated as a high hazard structure by both NRCS and the state. All right. Here is a picture of the watershed of the dam. So in blue, you will see that is the dam itself there in the upper left. And then the red line is really all the water that drains, anything that lands on, any rainfall that would land in that, inside that red area would drain to the dam and through it. Now, I apologize for this this being so busy on this screen. There's a lot of wording here, but I thought I would show it. But I think it's good to go over the recap of this. So again, back in 2015, we had the dam assessment completed, determined that we do need to rehab this dam. Town requested federal assistance from NRCS in September of 2015. So Town of Walpole said, yes, please, we'd like to explore rehabilitating this dam. So it took us a few years. We didn't get funding for Allen's site until 2019. So we did get our funding then, and the watershed plan and environmental document initiation started near the end of 2019. So we had our first public meeting in 2020, right in January, very early part of 2020. Alternatives were identified and evaluated after that meeting. In that meeting, they talked about there's a process to formulate alternatives. We wanted to get the public comment on what, how we should address some of those things. We did, and then DDK went through the process of evaluating alternatives, identifying and evaluating. Had a second public meeting in November of 2020 to present the alternatives that were found and describe the preferred alternative. So, and then after that public meeting, we had some time then that lapsed. The preliminary plan and environmental assessment was approved for public comment. That went through several stages of NRCS review. It went through a state review by us. We will go up and send it to our national and regional offices also for review. So that takes some time. So now we're in the process of looking at, we've put the plan environmental assessment out for public comment. That's why we're here tonight. The public comment period runs through March 28th. So we have another couple weeks in order to have the comments to come in. So if you don't have your question ready tonight and you have one that comes up next week or tomorrow morning, feel free then to write them down, get them to Carl, and he can get them to us. So, and the final plan EA will be completed, anticipated next month. We're anticipating we'll be able to address any comments that the public may have, answer them to satisfaction, and then move forward with finalizing this plan. So again, evaluate, went through environmental assessment and evaluation. That's what the project planning really is. What are the alternatives? how do each of those alternatives impact the environment? What, wetlands, species, of concern or interest, all those things, cost benefit analysis, a lot goes into this plan. This is that's why it takes years to develop. So basically what came out of this whole process is a preferred alternative. I believe there were 6 or 7 alternatives identified. The preferred one is this. So the idea is we're going to raise the auxiliary spillway. Now, again, that is the spillway that goes around the dam for storm flows. I'm going to go back to the aerial photo. It's a little bit hard to see on this, but it does flow around to the left. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but it would flow around here, around where that jog of the dam is. So most of the flow goes through the pipe. Even today, with all this rain and snow, I would imagine it's going through the pipe. But if it rained for 2 more days, or an intensity that's pretty high over the next day, you may eventually see it. When things start flooding, this would potentially flow around that side when it passes the 100-year storm event. So I'm going to go back down now to, I hope I am. Apologize, here we go. So yes, so we're going to raise the auxiliary spillway control about 10 inches. So we're going to have to raise that above the existing grade to contain the principal spillway hydrograph. Basically, the idea to meet NRCS requirements is we classify storm events or amount of water coming in a storm to the various time intervals. A 100-year storm event would be the average or the amount of water that can be expected to occur once in 100 years, and has a 1% chance of occurring in each year. So that's really what it is. We could have 200-year events in consecutive years, but it has a 1% chance based on available data of occurring in any given year. So that's a pretty good storm event. And the water is then contained behind the dam and flows through the pipe up to that level. If we get a storm event greater than that, that's when that auxiliary spillway may flow. So we need to raise the auxiliary spillway to meet the new requirement and to maintain that or contain that 100-year flow. And the reason that has changed, and Charlie can speak to this after potentially, but really you think about it, we're doing this for full build out, meaning we've had more impervious area upstream of the dam, or could have through construction and things like that within the watershed. So if it's impervious, water is going to move faster, run off faster, more water is coming to the dam quicker, has a tendency to need additional capacity. So we're going to raise the auxiliary spillway control. We're going to armor it with articulated concrete block, ACBs for short. Basically, that is something that looks similar to a cinder block you would see build a house foundation out of. Those cinder blocks, but they're all cabled together, tied together in a mat. So it's a big mat that's rolled out and laid out on the surface. So that then provides a reinforcement to help resist erosion when you have water flowing over it and down over at a slope, a pretty good slope down from the top, near the top of the dam, down to the stream below. There's a pretty good slope there. We need to armor that so it doesn't erode. So that's what that's looking at doing. We're then going to install a grouted stone fill trench at the end of auxiliary spillway and stove fill along the toe dam to prevent erosion. So again, that's all tying that in because we really want to make sure this stays. We don't have gullies forming and erosion taking place. Again, we're also, or in addition to that, we're going to raise the Tapa Dam about 9 inches. Again, just a little bit more capacity based on the current site conditions, the current watershed conditions, possibly updated rainfall data over since the time that this was originally designed. But 9 inches is not where that can be done and maintain the property boundaries, I think, where they are. Extending existing internal drain system. So there are internal drain systems in a dam to make sure we don't have water moving through the dam, make sure it's we're draining out the materials before they seep entirely through it. It's a safety system within the dam, and in every dam we have, very common. So we're going to update that. do some repair, remove accumulated sediment in the vicinity of the low-level intake, make sure that's clean, and clean, repair, and seal all exposed concrete surfaces. So that's a quick run-through of what we're doing. And if you have questions, we'll be glad to answer them. I'm glad Charlie's on to help correct anything I just misspoke and help answer any of the tough questions, because certainly he and his group were instrumental in developing all of this. Here, just showing a plan view of the proposed fix, and this is really what I wanted to show. You can see over here to the left edge, you see the water in theory will flow, well, not in theory, will flow out and down this slope. This is the articulated concrete block section where the auxiliary spillway, where overflows would flow if we would ever get enough rain. Now, that being said, this has never seen water. This dam is built such that it shouldn't see water very often at all, and it has not flowed since this dam has been built. That's a good thing. It means it was sized properly. It's only for extreme events that you would see that flow. Everything else is stored behind the dam and then slowly releases and gets moved through the principal spillway pipe. So next steps. So we're going to address any comments that come from this public review and comment period. So we will ask DDK to do that. So we'll answer those. All the questions from NRCS have been answered as far as the plan document goes. So once that's addressed, we'll then have the project sponsor, so the town and NRCS will sign a supplemental watershed agreement. The watershed agreement was signed, the original one was signed when they were ready to build the dam the first time. Now we're looking at supplementing it with a new watershed plan for rehabilitation, and we'll sign a new agreement saying, okay, your town's going to maintain it. Town will be is willing and able to fund their construction portion and do the necessary operation and maintenance requirements associated with having this dam. So that's where we'll go, in the relatively near future. I'm hoping by next month we're able to get that document signed. That will end the planning process. We'll be all set, ready to go. Then the town, if they're interested in continuing, will request NRCS assistance and funding for the design. So we'll look to then move forward with design. And if that's ready, we'll move into the design phase. I cannot guarantee that we will have the design funding right away as soon as we ask in this fiscal year, but it is there's funding available, has been funding available over the last few years. There's a lot of activity going on. So that's good that there's funding out there. It also makes it pretty competitive. A lot of states are doing this work, but we'll do our best to obtain that funding if the town is ready, when the town is ready to move forward. So that design process will take anywhere from a year to a year and a half, potentially 2 years. NRCS will hire a consulting firm to do the work through a competitive through a process that we have internally. And then once that's done, we'll go back to the town and say, okay, let's go move forward for construction. So really looking at this from the town's perspective, in 2 years from now, the town ought to be ready to have their share of the construction funds in hand, because NRCS can't bid it out for construction until we have all funds in hand ready to go. So that'll be based on an estimate. So, which I assume would be your next question is, well, what's the estimate for the preferred alternative? I don't have that on the slides, but it is in a document handout I was hoping to bring along so I could give to anyone who was interested, but I don't have it for you, and I apologize, but we can make arrangements to do so. But the total cost for construction is $5 million. Is estimated to be $5 million at this point. The actual construction costs are about 4.15 million. And then you look at the engineering being the design costs. Well, the engineering costs would be over 700,000. Project administration, nearly 200,000. Permits, 30,000. So the total is looking about 5 million. So the estimated construction portion for the town would be about 1.5 million is what we're looking at for the town, the estimate for the town at this point. and that is an opinion of cost from the consultant. And I think I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to, before I open it for questions, I'm going to let Charles Johnston weigh in here and correct anything I might have misspoke or add anything that I may have omitted. Charlie.
No, you did a great job, Darren. The main thing I would piggyback on that is that we did go through a pretty extensive alternative analysis where we looked at leaving the dam in place and removing the dam as well. But in the end, we did an economic analysis of those different options, and rehabilitating the dam is what was decided to be the most cost-effective for the dam from a benefit-cost ratio. I think at this project, we're looking at like a 17-to-1 benefit to cost of leaving the dam in place rather than taking the dam out and improving conditions downstream, like flood-proofing homes and the downstream infrastructure. This dam actually withholds quite a bit of water from flooding the town of Walpole, and is, I think, a key part of the reason why a lot of the developments happened in downtown Walpole area.
Right. Thank you for that. And that's an important point. And you know, folks might think, well, gee, the federal government, once they get money, they just go, right? We're just going to make this work no matter what. And that's not the case at all. We do, and we are in our policy tasked to look at, well, what about taking the dam out? Or what about doing no action? Or what about just doing some no structural work, just some vegetative work? That had to be evaluated by Charlie's group to make sure that those options aren't the best choice. Maybe we take the dam, just leave the dam the way it is, even though it doesn't meet current. Is that it'll be good enough? Well, it was understood that it would, and as you might think, that's not the best way to move forward with it. But it is looked at, and it is seriously looked at. It's not just rubber stamped. That all those evaluations are checked by internal folks of NRCS, and questions are asked. So it is a thorough process to go through all that. So it's not. When we get to this point of a preferred alternative, we feel pretty good about it.
And my last point I would make is, though the state of Massachusetts dam safety program may not require the town to make these implementations right now, because when we do it through NRCS, we look at future conditions, looking at what might occur in the next 100 years. Within those 100 years, we are projecting that the state of Massachusetts would require the town to do that. And without this program, they would be paying for the full construction cost, which right now is about $4.1 million. So the benefit to the town is being able to implement this project now with 65% of it being paid through the federal government.
Yes. And there's an efficiency in the paper, in the plan that was developed, that Charlie and his group developed. The economic efficiency, the dam, Allen State Dam provides about $2.5 million in annual flood protection benefits. So that's why it ranks so high. The cost benefit is of 17-to-1. It's very high. This is an important dam, and as the gentleman in the attendance can say, you know, you've seen what the floods can do prior to what this dam being here. Now, we've maybe not had that equivalent event, but we've certainly had some events over the years that would have led to some flooding if this structure wasn't here. One of my predecessors used to call these the silent protectors. You don't know they're there. You don't hear about them. You don't worry about them. They're there, but they do protect a lot. So, and I did want to clear up one thing too, because Charlie mentioned, you know, 4.1 million for construction. I said 5.1. That includes some additional, the permitting, the administration. We're not just making mistakes here. The construction contract would probably be about is estimated to be 4.125, I believe. The additional work that goes on with that, with construction oversight, administering the contracts, things like that, there's an additional fee cost in there. So, and it's anticipated the town will have to do some of that on their own. NRCS would administer the construction contract if we decided that would be the way to go. The town would certainly have a cost involved with their own staff and doing some of that as well. So that's included in that estimate. So, Joe, I should open up. Did I anything to add at this point?
Great job, Darren. Maybe I could just mention that there's going to be an Appendix A to this environmental assessment, and that's part of why we're here tonight, not only to explain the process and explain our design and what's going on, but we also want to take questions and answer questions from the public. So you can do that three ways. One is email. Another is this public hearing, which you're allowed to ask a question and we'll take it down. And the third is mail in. So that's part of this whole process, is to make sure that the public gets their questions in and that they get answered in the public process, and it's in the environmental assessment.
Very good. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And I'm at my end of my show. Well, I'll keep it. I will open it up for any questions from anyone in attendance tonight.
Darren and Joe and Charlie, thank you. That was a great presentation. For the record, as I opened up this meeting, I did not introduce myself. I'm Carl Bald, of Town Engineer with the Town of Walpole. Slightly after we started, both Town Administrator Jim Johnson and DPW Director Rick Mattson are also in attendance. And I do have a local resident. He's not an abutter, but a long-involved citizen, former selectman. Mr. Bill Hamilton would like to take the microphone and ask a question.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming.
Hi, I want to say this was a great presentation. I was watching it from home, and I thought that I might be able to ask a question. And this is a great project. I support it 100% because flood control is very important to the town of Walpole. However, there's a second issue in Walpole, and that's drinking water. You're going to have up to 36 acres of a pond. Could any of that be used as a reservoir?
So Charlie, I'll have you answer this too, but I can say that when the project was created or developed, originally thought of back in, well, it was built in 81, so in the 70s, we were working through this. There are different purposes for building a watershed operations project, a dam, that NRCS can take into account. And I believe water supply is one that is a possibility, although that at that time it was not identified and it was not part of the plan. So that was not considered at that time, nor moving forward to rehabilitate it. We don't typically add additional purposes. We rehabilitate it to meet the original intent of the dam. So that's where I'll stop there. Charlie, do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, that's correct. The primary purpose of the dam is for flood control, and then the secondary purpose that's identified in EA is recreation. So for this agreement, those were the only purposes that we evaluated this dam for. That's not saying the town of Walpole could not come back after this project and install measures to increase their water storage or potable water storage from this dam, but this project does not incorporate that into its purpose.
And if the town wanted to investigate that further, you'd certainly want to come to NRCS, and we would have to work through that process to see there are requirements that we'd like to be in the loop and certainly involved with how things moving forward as it relates to the dam. But I think it's a very forward thinking, which is good. Thinking at addressing these, it's a good question, really. And as you might understand or see from NRCS perspective, though, it's with over 11,000 structures across the country, to rehabilitate them. If we started saying, well, what about going above and beyond what they already are? I think that seemed like a daunting task. That, oh boy, now we're changing adding purposes, and whether it be for water supply or irrigation or anything else. I think they thought, no, rehabilitation is to just maintain the purposes that are there. So that's what this program does, and that's how we move forward with it, just because of the sheer volume and number, and to efficiently do that, to rehabilitate these, to maintain their safety and functioning. But again, that is something the town could consider and look at, and again, we'd be happy to have that conversation. So thank you very much for that question.
Yes. Now, the only thing that I would like to make sure is considered is that in the development of this, nothing would be done that would prevent a future reservoir. And it seems that you've answered that it could be a future reservoir, and I'm very grateful to hear that. Thank you.
Sure. And we have to, you know, I think, you know, the dam after rehabilitation has a reservoir behind it, and we can certainly discuss that. We could discuss that further.
Darren, Mr. Bill Climo would like to ask a question.
Sure.
I have, first question is, has the water ever gone around the dam in the 40 years it's been up?
I don't believe so. I don't know, unless someone from the town knows differently. I don't believe that the auxiliary spillway has ever flowed.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever gone around there. The other
No?
thing is the sluiceway or whatever that you're gonna build for catching the water, should it go around, the concrete?
Yes.
Is the area in there still gonna be accessible? You're not gonna have to put a road over that to get in there or anything?
I can speak to that. The alternative that is been selected for as the preferred alternative utilizes articulated concrete blocks as a lining of the spillway to prevent erosion. Right now, the alternative is to install those blocks across the spillway and along the side slopes, and then bury them in under topsoil. So if you were to go out to the dam, let's say in 2026 after this project is done, you'll see that, you know, the overall earth shape of the dam has been reworked, but theoretically it should look very similar to what it does today, where it's just a grass embankment and a grass spillway. Those blocks are suitable for people to drive on, and right now access is from Washington Street through the woods and then to that spillway and then to the top of the dam. So that would still be maintained. There was no intent to build a specific road though through
Okay.
the spillway to the top.
No,
of the dam.
it's easily entering now. I just didn't know how big that spillway was gonna be to possibly cut off any entrance in there.
No,
Okay,
the spillway will be basically the same size it is right now, and then it'll be grass, so you won't be able to see the blocks in the end.
okay. That's it for me. That's it. All right.
It looks like that's all the questions, Darren and Joe. I don't believe that anybody else has anything further, but I just want to thank you for putting all this together. It was a little bit of a last-minute activity here to get this to work, but I'd like to thank everybody that helped this out to happen and keep this on schedule and try and move this project along so we can get it designed and constructed.
Certainly. And then, thank you, Carl, for shifting quickly to allow us to make this happen, and with us not being in person. I really appreciate you being willing to do that and helping it go off smoothly. And I must say, as much as I always like to talk to town officials and local officials, it's even better when a couple residents are showing up to talk to. So I thank you for coming out on a snowy, rainy night and being in person and listening to what we have to say. I really appreciate that.
Great.
Is there anybody remotely that has questions, Carl? Do we check that?
Yeah, we don't see anybody with any questions remotely. That would have shown up on the screen.
Thank you, Carl.
Before we end, Carl, could you get everyone's name and spelling so that we can get that into the record for this meeting?
Sure.
Thank you.
And Charlie, were you able to document the questions?
Yep.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
But the amount of people it affects is huge.